welcome to the Yashi Show podcast. My name is Yasmin Madani, and my loved ones call me Yashi, and you can too. I can't believe this is already episode 6 of season 1, which is entitled Who Am I?, which is dedicated to each one of us taking the time to explore and learn about ourselves and our behaviors on our individual journeys of life through a lens of self-awareness. Before diving into this episode, as we are now at the halfway mark of season 1, I need you to do something for me, please. Please know that I sincerely thank each one of you for joining me every Wednesday for a new episode. And so, listeners, I encourage you to please follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and to please also subscribe to The Yashi Show on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. I appreciate all your support. Thank you again. So, today's topic I feel is very relevant for me, as I have personally learned so much about myself when dealing with emotional triggers through the lens of self-awareness, because I also learn more about building self-respect in the process. I think this episode may be relevant for you as well, because we can all relate to emotional triggers. Let me begin with something that I don't want you to answer quickly. I want you to feel this question. When was the last time that something small felt overwhelmingly big for you? Maybe it was a delayed text message or a shift in someone's tone. Perhaps it was a canceled plan or a moment of distance from someone you care about. And when that happened, you noticed changes in your body, your thoughts raced, and your emotions escalated. And maybe part of you may have even wondered, why does this feel like so much? This episode today is about that moment, but not just the moment itself. What it connects to, what it reveals, and what it asks of you. Today, we're going to explore emotional triggers, specifically with wounded relationship patterns. And we will also incorporate how empath dynamics factor in. So let's get started to do this quiet but powerful work of learning to choose yourself. And throughout this, I'm going to ask you some questions so that you can reflect on your own experiences and build self-awareness skills. Let's begin by trying to better understand emotional triggers. Emotional triggers are intense emotional reactions to present-day situations, such as things people say, do, or situations we find ourselves in that activate unresolved emotional experiences from the past. Experiencing a trigger means that certain reminders of a past traumatic event, whether external like a location or a scent, or internal like a memory or a feeling, bring back the emotions and reactions linked to that trauma. They are not random. They are patterned responses. A trigger is like a psychological bruise. So imagine when something presses on it, even lightly, it hurts, not because of the pressure itself, but because of what's already there. And here's the important part: the intensity of the reaction often doesn't match the present moment. It reflects something deeper. So emotional triggers are kind of like your nervous system saying, I've felt this before and it didn't end well. Triggers often show up as a sudden emotional surge, like anger, sadness, anxiety. Triggers often show up as a disproportionate reaction to a small event. It can be physical sensations with tight chest, racing heart, or the urgency to fix, defend, withdraw, or explain. Let's take a look at some real-life examples that we can all relate to. Imagine someone you care about, perhaps your spouse or partner or a good friend, doesn't reply to your message for hours. On the surface, it's just a delayed response, but inside you might feel anxious, rejected, or even abandoned perhaps. You might think, did I say something wrong? Are they losing interest? Do I matter to them? That reaction, that surge of emotion is the trigger, because on the inside, it felt like rejection, like being dismissed, like something important was slipping away. Another example is when someone gives you constructive feedback at work. Objectively, it's helpful, but you feel defensive, maybe even ashamed. Your mind might think or say, I'm not good enough, maybe I'm failing. Again, the emotional response is bigger than the moment. I want you to think about a recent moment where you felt strongly affected by something. Ask yourself, what exactly happened? What did I feel in that moment? And did that feeling feel familiar? These 3 questions would be helpful for you to take some time and journal your thoughts about when you can, because often triggers aren't just about what is happening, they're about what it reminds you of. So again, I'm going to repeat this. In case you want to journal right now, I want you to think about a recent moment where you felt strongly affected by something. Ask yourself, what exactly happened? What did I feel in that moment? And did that feeling feel familiar? Feel free to pause at this point and work on some journaling and then continue listening to the podcast. So moving on, where do these triggers come from? Most triggers are rooted in relationships where something was missing, inconsistent, or painful, such as being unheard, being criticized, being abandoned, or repeatedly not being chosen. Let's break these down and look at a few scenarios so we can take a closer look at each of them. Being unheard. Have you ever shared an idea at work or with a friend and felt like no one was really listening? Maybe you spent time explaining your feelings, your perspective, or a plan, and instead of acknowledgement, you got silence, a distracted nod, or the conversation immediately shifted to someone else's point of view. That moment, small as it might seem, can leave a deep sense of being invisible. And later, even the smallest disagreements can trigger that same feeling of not being heard. And you know, if you fast forward that to today and you're in a Zoom meeting and you're excited to share an idea, and let's say it gets completely ignored, and later someone else repeats the same idea and gets all the praise. Or you text a friend about a stressful day and then they just reply back with a one-word response, or perhaps they don't even respond at all. And that sting that you feel, that's the same old wound being triggered, the one where you felt like you were feeling unheard. Let's look at being criticized. Imagine a time when a teacher, parent, or a partner pointed out something you did wrong. Maybe it was your work, your choices, or even the way you expressed yourself. Even if it was intended as guidance, it landed as judgment, and that sting can echo for years. Now, in the present, if you fast forward, if someone offers feedback in a neutral or constructive way, you might still react defensively because your brain remembers that early experience of criticism and painful as being painful or shaming. And even when it was meant as guidance, it can trigger that old feeling of not being good enough. Let's look at being abandoned. Think about a moment when someone important in your life left unexpectedly. Maybe a parent walked out, a friend stopped calling, or a romantic partner ended a relationship. That feeling of being left behind or alone creates a wound. Later, even small signs of people distancing themselves, such as a late reply, a canceled plan, it can trigger fear, sadness, or anxiety because it taps into that early memory of abandonment. And today, being abandoned might not look like a dramatic disappearance. It often shows up in the subtle, quiet ways that chip away at your sense of security. It could be a partner who consistently cancels plans at the last minute, leaving you wondering if you're really a priority. It could be a friend who takes hours or days to respond to a message, even when you're sharing something vulnerable. Or it might be someone you love emotionally pulling back, becoming distant or unavailable, leaving you feel like you're reaching into empty space. Even though these moments seem small on the surface, they can trigger that old ache of abandonment, the same ache you felt as a child when someone important wasn't there for you. The thing about this trigger is that it's cumulative. One canceled plan or a delayed response might sting and pass, but when it happens over and over, it reinforces that early wound of being left behind. And suddenly, small, everyday interactions carry a weight far beyond what's happening in the present because they echo a lifetime of memories and expectations about being abandoned. Let's look at repeatedly not being chosen. This is a deep, often quiet pain being passed over again and again. Think about a marriage or a close relationship with your partner and how this can be especially hard. Imagine sharing your hopes, your needs, or simply wanting time together and watching your partner continually choose their parents' or family's needs or opinions over your own, even though you are their spouse. It's not about one moment, it's the repetition that cuts deep. Each time it happens, it whispers the old message: I'm not enough. My needs don't matter as much. That repeated pattern of not being chosen can stir feelings of rejection, invisibility, and heartbreak, reminding you of times in your life when your voice, your presence, and your worth were overlooked. And sometimes what makes it even more complex is this: you did receive apologies from your spouse, you did hear promises from them. I'll do better. You matter to me. I didn't mean to hurt you. But over time, the actions just didn't match the words that were being said. Sometimes not enough, or perhaps not at all. In these examples, apologies exist, but change doesn't. And let's take a closer look and talk about this very specific kind of hurt. I've had a few listeners who reached out about this, so that's why I want to focus in a little bit more about this week. This is the kind of specific hurt where you were acknowledged, you received apologies, you heard promises like, I'll do better, or you matter to me, and yet over time the pattern didn't change. You still weren't prioritized, you still felt secondary. It felt like you were on the sidelines instead of being at the center. You were there, but only when convenient, never the first choice. The wound of not being chosen, therefore, deepens. This creates a unique kind of emotional imprint because now it's not just I wasn't chosen, it becomes I was told that I mattered, but I was not shown that. And sometimes that contradiction can become even more painful than silence because hope was introduced. And so you got hopeful in the relationship along the way, but then, like usual, the actions didn't show up. And then that hope that you had quietly became unmet. So now let's fast forward and let's look at how this shows up in a healthier relationship. You're in a relationship that is in many ways healthier. There's effort, there's care, there's communication. But then something happens. Your partner says, I'm sorry, I'll make more time for you this week. But the week passes and nothing changes. What's happening internally? On the surface, it's a small disappointment, but internally, it lands much deeper. Your mind might go back to here we go again. Words, but no action. I'm still not being chosen. And the emotional reaction can feel intense, like so disproportionate. But it's not just about this week. It's about every time that you believed someone's words and that you waited for change. and that you hoped things would be different, and they weren't. Now, since I'm also an empath, and I know many of my listeners are too, I want to incorporate how this dynamic can be difficult for empaths in this particular example regarding the specific wound of not being chosen. Many empaths tend to naturally give more time, patience, and understanding in situations like this. And let's take a closer look at why that is. Because why do empaths give more patience? They have an innate sensitivity. Empaths often pick up on others' emotions, which can make them more forgiving of behaviors that they perceive are coming from love or duty rather than malice. Empaths have a desire for harmony, so they usually value emotional connection and may try to maintain peace in the relationship, even if it comes at a personal cost to them. Empaths have a very compassion driven reasoning, so they might rationalize that their partner's prioritization of parents and family as a cultural, familial, or emotional obligation. And with looking at this example, how does this play out in marital dynamics then for empaths? Is that they have such a high tolerance and compromise, and an empath may consistently bend to their husband's family needs, postponing their own desires or boundaries. There's so much more emotional labor because they often carry more emotional weight, managing both their own feelings and their partner's family expectations. There's internalized resentment because over time, if their needs aren't acknowledged, empathy can turn into frustration, sadness, or burnout. And there can be so many communication challenges because they might hesitate to confront their partner strongly, because they might fear conflict or guilt, which can lead to passive aggressive patterns or withdrawal. The empath may also not be able to feel confident to be able to reach out to the family or the parents or the in laws in this case because of, again, the fear of conflict or possibly guilt. What is key here, though, is that there's opportunity for growth because if both partners recognize these dynamics, then it could lead to a deeper understanding, a negotiation of boundaries, and mutual respect for each other. And I think the key takeaway here for empaths is that empaths naturally give time, patience, and understanding, but without boundaries, recognition, and reciprocity, this dynamic can cause long term frustration or burnout. The healthiest pattern is empathetic negotiation, where the empath's emotional needs are acknowledged alongside the husband's obligations to his parents and family. Again, I want to please note here that I'm specifically focusing on emotional triggers in this specific example, as I've had a few listeners who wanted to learn more about this topic from this aspect, particularly due to challenges in their culture dynamics and cultural expectations in marriage and family. I think it's very important to touch upon self respect here because self respect is the regard and value that you have for yourself, treating yourself with dignity, honoring your own needs and boundaries, and believing that you deserve fairness, kindness, and integrity from yourself and others. It's not about arrogance or thinking that you're better than others. It's about acknowledging your worth and refusing to compromise your principles or well being. And, when you're trying to break the pattern with self respect, this is where self respect becomes so essential because not as a reaction, but as a standard. Self respect doesn't ignore effort, but it also doesn't ignore patterns. It asks, am I being met consistently? Do actions align with words? And am I feeling valued over time, not just in moments? So, emotional triggers are powerful signals. because they tell us when something from the past is influencing how we feel in the present. The first step in working with them is self awareness, noticing not just what you feel, but why you feel it and what patterns might be repeating. Once you recognize a trigger, you can take intentional steps to respond rather than react. First, pause and observe. Notice your emotions without judgment. Ask yourself, what is this feeling connected to? Then, try to identify the pattern. Consider whether this is about the present moment or if it echoes past experiences or wounds. Then, acknowledge your needs. Recognize what you need to feel respected, safe, or prioritized in this moment. Choose a grounded response. Respond from self respect, not ego or automatic reaction. Speak your truth, set boundaries, or take space if needed. And practice consistency with yourself. Honor your feelings and boundaries repeatedly. Self respect is strengthened over time through action, not just awareness. Remember that your emotional triggers are not weaknesses. They are guideposts pointing you towards your values, boundaries, and what truly matters to you. By observing them with clarity and compassion, you can break old patterns, you can make healthier choices, and you can begin to build relationships and a life that truly aligns with your needs. Thank you for being here today. Remember, my name is Yashi, and I believe in you. Hope you'll join me again next week on The Yashi Show. Until then, be kind to others, and also remember to be kind to yourself.